high atop the pastoral center of the Diocese of Camden, you're listening to Talking Catholic.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Talking Catholic. I'm Jen Morrow, and with me, as always, is Mike Walsh.
Yeah, I truly love the introductions because you can tell what kind of day it's been depending on how you introduce me. It feels like that introduction was a long week, even though it's only been a 3-day week.
What, is it the always? Because I'm like, with me as always.
Yeah, I know. That's why a couple episodes back we changed it up, so you got a new co-host, so you could be all excited for Mike Brest instead.
Right.
Which reminds me, actually, we are talking about having another high school and sports related podcast soon about something. I've been meaning to ask you, Jen. Do you want me as your co-host, or do you want Mike Brest as your co-host?
Yeah, I know. I knew you were going to ask me that, actually, and I think I'm leaning toward Mike Brest.
That's not a problem. I will accept this. I don't mean to be
insulting. He's got the high school. His finger on the high school pulse, and also, the schools know his. Well, they know you too. It's Mike Brest. I'm sorry. I'm just making this.
Okay, that's fine.
It's going to be
that's
Brest.
Okay. We could have done this off the air, and then I realized, why wait? Let's just figure it out now. So in the future, dear listeners, you will hear a podcast where Jen once again gets to share the microphone with a different mic.
That's right.
Good times. But we have had a very good week, Jen. This has been an exciting week. Fortunately, we're recording this a few days after Memorial Day weekend. We did, in fact, do what we said we were going to do, which was finally not coerce with any of our colleagues for 3 straight days after having spent the most of the month of May basically up in each other's grills for every day and every weekend. So did you have a good few days away for Memorial Day weekend?
I did, and I'm going to say I picked up the cell phone a few times to text all you guys just to say something funny, and then I thought, no, I'm good, and I just put it back down and went about my day. But I did a little gardening, saw a concert, got a lot of sleep. My husband did not wake me up before 10:30, 3 days in a row, which has been the longest I've slept in a long time.
God bless him.
And
what
you?
A good husband.
Yes.
Jack had many scouting things to do this weekend, so I was on the road a bit and up early, unfortunately. But on Memorial Day weekend, I made like a sloth and moved slowly and did little. So I was very, very, very. I feel like I did Memorial Day correctly, which was as little activity as possible, other than, of course, remembering those who have lost their lives in the line of duty. So that always stays front and center. Which, for now that I am an older gentleman of a certain age, that means getting to watch old war movies on TCM and HBO and things like that. So that was
it's
good.
Nice because my husband did serve for a long time, as you know, and so on Memorial Day he got a lot of texts, and he got a lot of texts from people that we don't hear from often during the year. So it's like a nice time that not only to catch up, but for them to recognize all the things that he did over his career. So I like that day because it makes him feel good, and I like that too. I like
that's
that.
Good to hear.
Yeah,
I'm glad to hear that.
So.
Actually, that means a lot to me to hear something like that. My brother-in-law served in the Navy for a very long time, and it's good for those guys who have retired since to be sort of. I realize that's more for Veterans Day, but Memorial Day, I think there's a natural inclination to think about people who are still living and served. So I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, but always remember, reach out, because you never know that the person who's still living probably served with somebody who's not. So
that is a good point.
Always good to remind. But as you said, we've had a busy couple of weeks for listeners who were just tuning in. We had a diaconate ordination one weekend, a priest ordination the weekend after that, and a new bishop announcement 3 days later. So that is why Mike and I did not want to see each other for a very long time. And now we're about to go into graduation season. So there's a lot going on around the diocese.
Yes, it's a very busy time. And if you'd like a full recap of the month of May, I encourage you to read Bishop Sullivan's column from this week. He did a fantastic job of recapping exactly everything we were working on for the last month. So if you want the Cliff Notes version, make sure you check out his column in this Catholic Star Herald this weekend. So I actually read that column when he sent it to us. I went, Hey, that's very useful. Thank you for that, because I had forgotten a couple of things we had worked on.
Yeah. I was like, wow, so much got packed in that I forgot we did that 4 weeks ago.
So, dear listeners, this is an episode that I have been wanting to do for a very, very long time. For our long time listeners, you know that I have a inclination towards science, and I have an appreciation for the intersection of science and faith. You know, back in the day, before I came to work for the diocese, I worked in a lot of secular fields, and I was sort of the token Catholic. And I would often be asked, particularly when I worked more in scientific fields, you know, I was often asked by people who were either agnostic or atheist, you know, how can you work in a field like this and be a Catholic, or, you know, or just they would generally ask me, how can you be a person of faith with all the science around you that sort of negates faith? And my answer was always, I don't think it negates my faith at all. If anything, I think it strengthens it. One of the beauties of our faith is that it inspires us to constantly be looking forward, and there's a natural inclination to try to find the face of God in different things. So many years ago, I came across, I don't know how it ended up on my radar, other than that I read a lot of science books. Matter of fact, I don't know how I got on this mailing list. I'm walking away from the camera right now to show that for some reason I get regular textbooks sent to me about college physics. So, and I don't know how I ended up on this mailing list, but I did, and I greatly appreciate it, though I wish whoever the book publisher is would learn that I actually don't know how to do math. I just like looking at the pretty pictures. But
look, don't try to pull out a physics book so that you are like the smartest person on this podcast, because you're not.
No, I'm not. So,
today.
As I finished this very long introduction, I ended up on somehow a mailing list for the Society of Catholic Scientists, which I thought was right in line with my thinking about this. So I've been on that mailing list for some time, and then I'm in a meeting with one of the pastors, talking about what's coming up in the diocese, and I find out that the president of the Society of Catholic Scientists is presenting that very evening in Hamilton, New Jersey. This was a few weeks back, and I was like, I wish I had known about this earlier. I got so many things going on, and then was like, you know what? I think I'm going to reevaluate my evening and just head down there anyways. I was able to catch the second half of his presentation, and it was as fascinating and joyful as I'd hoped. Actually, it was. I'll even go further. It was more joyful than I was expecting. Well, I've been to a lot of science presentations, and they can be dry from time to time. This was not dry, so I was very excited about it. So I say all that to say this: Jen, who is our guest today?
I feel like you should introduce them because you are total fanboying, but I'm going to do it. We have Professor Stephen Barr, who is the president of the Society of Catholic Scientists, and he's also Professor Emeritus of the University of Delaware. Welcome.
Thanks for having me on. It's good to be here.
Very
I
good.
think
Thank you for joining us.
your autograph afterward. Can you send it soon?
The truth of the matter is,
but not electronic autograph.
No. Unfortunately, Jen, I gave up my opportunity when he was presenting because there were quite a few people surrounding him, and I didn't want to take my fellow members of the flock away from the professor while he was had the opportunity to speak with him. And then I immediately emailed him the next day and said, "Hey, would you like to come on the podcast?" So thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate that.
Thanks for having me on.
So let's start out with the easy question, since I've already referenced it a couple of times. What is the Society of Catholic Scientists, and why does it exist?
Well, the what is easy, and I'll go into more detail on the why it exists. So it's an organization of Catholic scientists. In fact, I think it's the only one that I have heard of in the world, that just an organization of Catholic scientists. And so we started in 2016 in the summer. So we're almost 8 years old. And we started with just 6 of us, I and 5 friends of mine. And we're now up to over 2,200 members. At least that's the number who've ever joined. There may have been, a few people, there's some people I know who died, but I think we're over 2,000 members. So we're growing at quite a good clip. And to be a member, you have to be in a natural science. So physics, chemistry, biology, biomedical research, stuff like that. We also include math and computer science, but we don't have some of the social sciences and so on. So why did we start? Well, there's a number of reasons. As you mentioned, there's a widespread perception, misperception, that somehow science and religion don't fit together, that they're at odds with each other. You can't really believe in God and also believe in science, and that's done tremendous damage to the religious belief, to the church. And we thought we need to start pushing back against that. It is a myth. It's a misperception. And we thought the most effective way to push back against it, really, an essential part of it, of pushing back against that, would be to have a large number of scientists who are believers publicly, making themselves public as believers. If you can have a scientist here or there who comes out and defends religious belief, but people might dismiss that, say, well, he's an oddball or an outlier. That's not typical. But we thought if you had a large number of scientists and reputable, scientists who come out who are Catholic believers, that's something that can't be so easily dismissed. So that was one of the motivations. There was another motivation. Or should I stop there? I could.
No,
tell
please
you.
Continue. We appreciate that.
Well, one thing that another motivation is in some way based on my early experience. One of the problems, if you're in the academic world and you're out of step, where you think you're out of step with what people believe, it could be on religion, it could be on politics, you tend to keep your head down. You tend to keep quiet about it because the academic world is actually not the most tolerant place, ironically. And so people find it safer to sort of be discreet about their faith, unfortunately. And that actually is can be quite a prudent thing, especially if you're young. And as a consequence, religious people tend to be much less visible in the scientific world because they're keeping it to themselves. So the atheists are out there making a lot of noise, and the religious ones have historically tended to be quiet about it. And one of the consequences of this is that religious scientists don't know of each other's existence. Not only does the world not know about them, but they don't know about each other. And that's why, when I was an undergrad at Columbia, and then I was a grad student at Princeton, I could not have told you of any of the professors in the physics departments who I knew to be religious, except for one. He was an Orthodox Jew and he wore a yarmulke. Otherwise, there was nobody. And I could not have named a world famous scientist at that time who I knew to be religious, let alone practicing Catholic. And so you feel isolated. You feel, am I the only one?
Yeah.
And that's not a good situation. So that's another motivation. So now we have an organization, as I said, of over 2,000 members, mostly in the US, but also growing in Europe and other places. And they know of each other's existence. And hopefully, as time goes on, more people will know of our existence. And we're sort of showing, it's a witness to the world, among other things, of the harmony between science and faith.
That's
Oh, Michael and I are going to be doing this the whole time, talking over each other.
That's okay. That's okay.
Go ahead.
Well, I'll tell you, that was something that you mentioned during your presentation that I hadn't been aware of, that inclination in academia to sort of put a lid on things that may be considered counterculture, that could stop you from advancing in that area of industry. And it didn't occur to me until then that this was, you were really offering a respite. I'm a PR guy for the Diocese of Camden, and something that I've been preaching for the 8 years I've been here has been for our priests and religious and laity to be more public about their faith in the secular world. I want our priests to be offering prayers at major civilian events and public events and things like that, and not in opposition to them, but as part of the event. If there's going to be some form of an event to eulogize for Memorial Day, for instance, I would hope that one of our pastors would be a chaplain or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I've noticed, particularly since 2000, when a lot of the negativity towards the Catholic Church really broke globally, there's been a reticence to promote your faith, even those of us who work in the diocese, for fear, a natural fear that you're going to be pushed back against for something like that. So it really spoke to me when I heard that during your presentation in Hamilton. Have you felt like you've been successful in that? Helping people feel more comfortable?
Let me say, you're not necessarily, I should say that it's not as if the scientific world, and this also is a myth, that the scientific world is just a place devoid of faith, that you're going to run into a lot of hostility. It's not true. You will not typically run into a lot of hostility towards religion. The people, who are, there are a lot of unbelievers, shall we say, in the scientific world. There are also a lot of people who are religious. And there are a lot of people in the middle who, including a lot of people who are indifferent. But the number of people who are sort of militantly anti-religious, who will be sort of, hostile to you, or that might even discriminate against you, is probably quite small. I have only, in 40 years in science, I have only had 2 cases where somebody that I knew, one of my colleagues that I knew, sort of exhibited hostility towards me when he discovered that I was religious. So it's actually rare, and I don't want people to think that people shouldn't. In a way, people are too afraid. Now, it's true. I do counsel. It depends on. You have to be prudent. So you have to know who you're dealing with. You have to know your own situation. So if you're young, it's to be on the safe side. If you're a grad student or you're a postdoc or something like that, or a non-tenured professor, and you don't know who you're dealing with, you might want to be cautious about revealing too much. Wait until you're more established and you have a reputation and some job security. But I don't want somebody to go out and but they, on the other hand, that could be that caution. People should be prudent. As I said, they shouldn't be paranoid about it. Mm. A lot of people, when they found out I'm religious, wasn't really making a lot of noise about it, most of my career. Most people were very laid back, took it in stride. I don't think it hurt my reputation in any way. And there are some very big name scientists who are religious, and that's well known. I mean, people know you can be a good scientist and be religious. That scientists are aware of that. So anyway, I don't want to. You have to balance, and it all depends on your own situation, who you're dealing with.
So can we talk about a little about who are some of those big names, the Catholic scientists who also are religious, and did that detract from either their religiosity or their profession?
No, I don't think it did. So there are, we have in our society, Catholic scientists, some big name people, I should say. So for example, we're having our 8th annual conference. We only had 7 because of COVID. We missed one, but our 7th conference is actually next week, 10 days from now, out near Chicago. And the first speaker at the conference is one of the top evolutionary biologists in the world, who's from Harvard, Martin Novak. and he's a believing Catholic. So I've heard him called the greatest living evolutionary biologist, but he's certainly up there in the stratosphere of that field. He's a mathematical biologist, so he studies. He doesn't just study evolution; he also studies uses mathematical techniques also to study things like cancer and cancer treatments and so on. What we've given we give something called the St. Albert Award almost every year. And I'll mention two of the members of our society who we gave a St. Albert Award to, St. Albert being the patron saint of science. One of them is one of the top theoretical physicists in the world. His name is Juan Martín Maldacena. And he is at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton. So he's in your state. I don't know if Princeton's in your diocese.
Nah, just outside, unfortunately.
Okay.
It's close,
well,
though.
he wrote a paper which is the most highly cited paper in the history of theoretical physics. In fact, in my talk that you went to, Mike, in Hamilton, I showed a list of the top 5 most cited papers in the history of theoretical particle physics. And the number 5 on the list was written by Stephen Hawking. Number 3, I think number 2 on the list was a paper written by Steven Weinberg, who's a Nobel Prize winner, and it's the foundational paper of what's called the Standard Model of particle physics. These are the top all-time hits. And so Juan Maldacena's paper is number 1 on the list. It's the most cited paper, and it's for a very revolutionary breakthrough in the understanding of quantum gravity. And that 500 years from now, people are going to know about that paper. That's a major milestone in history of physics. So he's a believing, practicing Catholic. Another one, last year we gave our St. Albert Award to a Japanese physicist, also in my field, named Tony Sanda, Sanda, Anthony Ichiro Sanda. I knew of him when I was a grad student. One of the first papers I read, from which I learned some basic techniques in quantum field theory, was a paper by Fujikawa Lee and Sanda. So the name Tony Sanda I know from when I was a student. Anyway, it turns out I only discovered a few years ago. He's retired now. But Tony Sanda won he won an award given by the American Physical Society, the most prestigious award in the United States for theoretical particle physics. He's Japanese. He won a number of awards in Japan, of the most prestigious scientific awards in Japan, including 2 awards from the Emperor of Japan. Well, it turns out that Tony Sanda is a practicing Catholic and, in fact, a deacon in the Archdiocese of Tokyo.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I was really blown away because this was a name very familiar to me, for my own research career. And so, there are some really top people. 2 members of our founding board. I said we were founded by 6 of us. 3 of those 6 are converts. One of them, who's rotated off the board, is a member of the National Academy of Sciences, Jonathan Lunine. That's the highest you can get in science in the United States, sort of winning a Nobel Prize, National Academy of Sciences. So he's a member of the National Academy. He's a professor of astrophysics at Cornell University, a very top guy, a convert from a Jewish background. Another member of our founding board is Karen. I'll anglicize it, Karen Oberg. She's Swedish by birth and brought up a nominally Lutheran home, but she converted to Catholicism about, less than 10 years ago. And she's a hotshot, rising star in her field of astrochemistry and astrophysics at Harvard. She's a professor at Harvard. So I'm just saying there's a lot of first-rate people out there, including converts to the faith, who are members of the Society of Catholic Scientists. So I'm sorry I ramble on, but I'm very proud to show off some of our
No,
members.
you're not rambling. I'm taking notes. There's a lot of notes here. I'm sure a lot of listeners will be as well. But you've mentioned now I'm going to come in with some hard questions. Sorry,
Yeah.
Mike, I'm jumping in now. So here's a question, especially because you mentioned some of those big names, one of which is a deacon, like you said. Thinking about an evangelization tool, how do you talk to creationists about evolution and Catholicism?
Well, we're mostly, we don't talk to them very much. I mean, so the society exists for several reasons. One, there's sort of an internal reason, and then there's sort of outreach. So internally, we're the Catholic scientists talking to other Catholic scientists and Catholic scholars in other fields like theologians, philosophers. So first of all, it's to create a community of Catholic scientists around the world. We want to create a fellowship, for spiritual and intellectual fellowship among Catholic scientists. But that's sort of just step one. I mean, that's not the end of it. We also want to serve an apologetic and a catechetical role, right, to help to help people think about science and faith, especially Catholics, but not only Catholics. But of course, charity begins at home, so it was mostly directed towards Catholics, I think, but not only Catholics. And so we, in addition to our annual conference, which is basically just for Catholic scientists and some other scholars, we have some outreach kinds of things. So there's a website, which we can talk about. So I'm very proud of our website. But we have, for example, college chapters around, we have 25 college chapters, mostly in the US. And they have events on their campuses. Lectures. So each chapter will have at least one public lecture, and they also have something called a gold mass. One of the we've heard of red masses for lawyers. Well, we invented something called, and there's a white mass for medical people, a blue mass for law. We invented a gold mass for scientists and science teachers, and there have been a number of them around the country. So that's some. So our chapters do things, and we also have started doing things for high school students. So we have an annual event. I hope we can increase this to several a year at some point. But we have these events for high school, like science fair kind of things for high school students, and we've had 4 of them. One of them was in Philadelphia. Yeah. So that was that was in 2023. Is that right? Yes. And they bring in typically around 200 high school students and teachers, mostly students, but about 200, over 200. So and that's very good. So so we're trying to show the student. So I can talk about the St. Albert initiatives, but we're doing a lot of things to reach out now. So we don't focus that much on creationism, because most Catholics who are scientifically oriented are not creationists in the sense of young earth creationists, don't believe in evolution, or believe the earth is 10,000 years old and that kind of thing. So that's actually more a fundamentalist Protestant thing. For example, it would be very hard to, and I should say the scientists in our group, for those who are wondering, we are committed to being faithful Catholics. We are faithful to the teachings of the Church. Mm-hmm. We are, believe what the Church teaches. So we're not some sort of dissenters or anything. It's very hard to find a Catholic scientist who doesn't believe in evolution and believe that the universe is billions of years old. And to find a young Earth creationist, I mean, I have encountered a few, but they're very, very rare. So it's not really a Catholic thing. Now, the thing is, some Catholic lay people, I mean, like scientific lay people, are sort of caught up in some of that. And I think it's partly, they get it partly from their evangelical friends and neighbors. One of the downsides of what is otherwise a very positive thing, there's a very positive development, as you know, that Catholics and Protestants get along much better than they used to. And, they're engaged together in pro-life activities and things like that. And they rub shoulders much more than they did in the past. Well, That's a wonderful thing, and many evangelicals have become Catholic. And so what's happened is some of the anti-evolution stuff and sort of extreme biblical literalism has sort of crept into the Catholic Church in the United States through that influence. And we do want to counteract that, but it's not what we're mainly doing. It's not what we're making. Except, maybe I shouldn't ramble on, but our website. So let me talk about our website, because we have a lot of educational material on the website. And one of the very nice things we think is called Common Questions About Science and Faith. And the way that developed is somehow we got our hands on some questionnaires or surveys. They were done of a few hundred Catholic high school teachers. And one of the questions they were asked is, what are the most common questions your students ask you about science and faith? And so we took all these sheets of paper, they were scraps of paper. We looked, and basically these 100 or so answers fell into 16 most common questions. And so in our common questions about science and faith on our website, we have 16 questions. We'll increase that in due time. And each question we give an answer that is accessible to a high school student, but they're very meaty, substantive answers, about 750, 800 words to each question. And of those 16 questions, there's probably 4, 5, or 6 have to do with evolution in one way or another. So that is a very common question. And so and we give our answers there.
Actually, I was going to, not to interrupt, but I was going to actually bring that up. So I have your website up on my other computer here.
You can read the first 6 questions.
So question 1, does the Catholic Church accept evolution? A, does the Catholic Church accept evolution? B, did the Catholic Church ever condemn evolution in the past? Question 2, doesn't evolution show that a creator is not needed? 3, don't physics theories of how the universe began show that a creator is not needed? Doesn't the book of Genesis contradict the Big Bang and evolution? If humans evolved from other animals, how can we be special, have spiritual souls, or be made in the image of God? How do Adam and Eve fit into evolution and the science of human origins? Aren't miracles contrary to the laws of nature and therefore impossible? Science is based on evidence. What evidence for God? Isn't the idea of faith contrary to reason, evidence, freedom of thought, and form of basis of science? And it continues to go on. I like my personal favorite. Doesn't science show that free will is an illusion? But when you actually click on these questions, I know it's right, Jen. That's a great question. When you click on the question, it goes to just shy of what you would expect to see from a scientific paper, with footnotes and everything explaining sort of Catholic's faith way of answering these questions. And and you're absolutely right, Stephen, that they are meaty answers. Like you cannot say that you have not been explained an answer to this question once you read these pages. They're genuinely outstanding.
They're very meaty. They're not breezy or dumbed down. They're very substantive. They cover a lot of ground very concisely. But I think a high school student, any high school student who's interested in these questions would understand these answers. There's nothing, there won't be anything over their heads, and there are references and suggestions for further reading. So that's one of the kinds of things on our website. I got an email recently from some guy in the Netherlands, and he said, "Do you mind if we, as a member of SCS?" He says, "These are great." He said, "These answers, do you mind if we translate them into Dutch, and circulate them?" I said, "Go ahead." The more people, I really think another thing, so there, as you see from those questions, we do tackle the question of evolution and creationism and all that kind of stuff, and is very big, because I think something like 5 of the questions out of the 16 from high school students are about that. And so we do give answers to that. But at our conferences, for example, we don't end up talking about that specifically very much, about whether it's just assumed that evolution is correct. I mean, we don't have to argue about that because they're all at our conferences, they're all scientists and they know all the evidence for evolution. But we do have talks that are relevant. So, for example, as I said, the first talk at our next conference next week is by this top evolutionary biologist at Harvard. And he has his talk will be about evolution. I think it's called something like how evolution points to God or something like that. But we've had talks on human origins. So we had somebody whose research is on early humans, and he goes to Africa and finds fossils of hominids and things like that. So we've had talks on what is the current state of knowledge of human origins, early humans, about Neanderthals and so on. A lot of interesting questions about Neanderthals. How did they have language? Did they have spiritual souls? Did they have language? That kind of thing. Yeah.
That's a great question. That's I think it's question 15 in here. I'll say the question first. Would the existence of intelligent extraterrestrials be consistent with Catholic belief? That's a great question. And I just ironically, or in happenstance, my parents gave me a book for my birthday just a few weeks ago from a Jesuit scientist who's the head of the Vatican Observatory. Yes. Would you baptize an extraterrestrial? And I haven't read the book yet. I can't wait to see how it ends. But
we had talks on that. In fact, I plan to. We have articles on our website, and we have 40 of them at the present moment. I think we're 39. One of them is written by a fellow. A very interesting book came out recently by a Catholic. I think I don't know if he's a philosopher, but not a scientist, but on extraterrestrial life, and has a lot of fascinating. His name is Paul Thigpen. You might have heard of him. So one thing I learned from his book is that Christians have been talking about the possibility of intelligent extraterrestrial life for centuries. It's not something that just arose recently with space travel and so on. So this is something that's been discussed since the Middle Ages. And interestingly enough, most Christians, both Catholic and Protestant, most of the Christians who've written about this for the last few centuries, for now, what is it? Probably 400 or 500 years. Most of them believed that it was most likely that there were such creatures, and they didn't see anything in that was harmful to Christian belief. You might have thought, some people might have the impression, oh boy, this really is going to upset the apple cart, how are you going to fit this in with Christianity? This is something radical. Christians have talked about this for a long time and didn't really see much of a problem there. And I don't think there is much of a problem. I'm going to write an article about that for our website. It'll probably come out in the fall. So we've had talks at our conferences on extraterrestrial life. So several talks. I mentioned two of our board members, Karen Oberg and Jonathan Lunine. Jonathan Lunine is one of the world leading experts on what's called astrobiology. What conditions do you need on other planets for there to be life, and so on. And so he's one of the top he's written a textbook on astrobiology. And Karen Oberg, and he's talked at our conference. Karen Oberg, also a member of our board, she's a leading expert on what's called astrochemistry. And so she's a big expert on the chemical conditions in other planetary systems. Do other planetary systems have water? Do they have organic molecules? Do they have the conditions in which life could start? She's a world expert on it. So these are things that we talk about. That's one of the things we do is we talk amongst ourselves and also for the benefit of the wider public about some of these issues at a level that's sort of top notch as far as the science goes, but also in line with Catholic teaching and sort of top notch in theologically and philosophically. So anyway.
Mike, no
So much
offense.
fun stuff.
I was gonna say, Mike, no offense, but these conversations sound a lot more interesting than the conversations we have. So I would like to be a fly on the wall in these conversations with Professor Barr.
And that is only because I speak to my audience when I have a conversation. When I was working with computer engineers and medical scientists and things like that, these are the conversations I would have with them. But none of my colleagues can talk about physics or anything else. I never have a chance to bring these up. But these are the things. Like this is not a video podcast, or else people would just see me grinning from ear to ear and nodding my head aggressively every time Dr. Barr makes a point, and I'm very excited about that.
Well,
It's fun. Well, I was just going to say that there's this, going back to something you had said earlier, Stephen, about sort of the nature of the church and science. The Catholic Church, really, for at least 100 years, if not several hundred years, has had its own scientists at the Vatican. I mean, it has the Vatican Observatory. It has the Vatican Academy of Sciences. That one of these days I'm going to weasel my way into both of them. Haven't had that happen yet.
No. The Pontifical Academy of Sciences is not just of Catholic scientists. So those are just a lot. There are Catholic scientists on it, but there are also many, many scientists who are, including atheists, on it. So when I said earlier that we're the only organization I knew that was an organization of Catholic scientists, I think that still may be true.
Yeah.
But it's not just that there's a Pontifical Academy of Sciences. One thing I have become increasingly aware of in recent years is that if you go back to the history of science, so modern science really began in around the time of Galileo, Kepler, around 1600. Before that, you had Copernicus, but that's around the time that what science calls science today really exploded, in the 1600s. And from that time until maybe the middle of the 1800s, the overwhelming majority of scientists were religious. They were devout Christians, about half Protestant, about half Jewish, half Protestant, half Catholic. So the devout Christians, almost all of them. In fact, if you go to the sort of what's called the century of the scientific revolution, the 1600s, you look at all of them were devout Christians. Galileo, Kepler, Isaac Newton, Pascal, Descartes, all of them were devout Christians. And that continued to be the case for a long, long time. And in every century since, there are numerous famous scientists in every field who are believing and practicing Catholics. And one way you can see that is by going to our website again and do a feature called Important Catholic Scientists of the Past, or Catholic Scientists of the Past. We have about 100 little mini bios. And there's a lot of lists of Catholic scientists online, and almost none of them are reliable because they have non-Catholics in there, they have atheists in there, they have people. Every one of the people in our list we have solid reasons for believing they were believing Catholics, and almost every single one of them were really important in the history of science. They left their names in the history of science. Any scientist going to that list of bios will be blown away because he or she will see all these famous names from their own fields in that list.
It's funny you brought that up. That was the page that was on my computer right now, because that was going to be the next thing I brought up. It's a fascinating list, because I don't think there would be a natural inclination for most Catholics to realize that there were so many learned scientists from our faith
It's really astonishing how many. And now, just for a takeaway, a memorable thing that people can go to that list. There are whole branches of science so most of those people are not priests; they're lay people. Most of them, but there are some priests who are very important in the history of science. And so 3 branches of science, actually several more, but there are 3 names that everyone should know. And they were founded entire branches of science. So one everybody does know, Gregor Mendel, who was an Augustinian priest, is the founder of the science of genetics. The Big Bang Theory, not the TV show, but the actual theory, which is a central pillar of our understanding of the cosmos. was founded. That theory was proposed by a Catholic priest who was a theoretical physicist and mathematician named Georges Lemaitre, Lemaitre, Georges Lemaitre. He's the founder of basically almost modern cosmology, really. And the third is geology. You could say that the founder of geology was a priest back in the 1600s named Nicholas Steno, Blessed Nicholas Steno. He was a convert from Lutheranism. So there are three major branches of science founded by priests, and there are other branches also founded by priests. But I don't want people to think only priests, all the Catholic scientists are priests. It's far from it. There's huge numbers of big name scientists who are lay people.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in the fact that you brought up geology too, because I think like a lot of times people think science and religion, and the first thing they go to is, I think, evolution, like we were talking about. And
Right.
But I think geology is interesting as well. I just want you to know that this is not a call-in show, obviously, but I have 1,000 questions from one of my loved ones who knows that you're on the show today.
Well, they can email me, but not with all 1,000 questions.
3 of them, but I'm going to only ask you to answer one of them. How is that?
Okay.
These are the questions. We talked about one. Adam and Eve, the Garden of Eden versus Pangea. That was one. Christ on other planets, which we kind of touched on. But then this one I have to like, and this one is God and time. Will our resurrected bodies be subject to time and space?
Wow. Each one of these could be an hour. Now, as it happens, we have articles on some of these on our website. Can I answer all 3 very quickly? So Adam and Eve.
I don't know if we have time.
Well, I think I can get there very quickly. So Adam and Eve, it's not a question of whether there were 2 people who actually called each other Eve and Adam. That's not the question. The question is, were there some first human beings who had spiritual souls? Now, evolution might suggest no, because species evolve very gradually. There's no such thing as the first horse or the first cat. As you go back through history, you can't say, oh, that's a cat, and his parents were not cats, because it's all gradual changes. But when you're talking about human beings, the question is, were there first beings who had a spiritual, immortal soul? And there had to be. You either have a spiritual, immortal soul or you don't. And so somewhere back in our ancestry, there had to be some first beings who were spiritual, were made in the image of God and spiritual, immortal souls. Call them Adam and Eve. That's what Scripture calls them. But the name is not important. So that's the crucial thing. And there's nothing inconsistent with believing that and believing in evolution. And there's articles on our website about that. On the question of is Christ on other planets? Very good question. The really interesting question about extraterrestrial life, theologically, is not whether there are rational beings elsewhere in the universe. There well could be. There's no problem there. No one's ever seen a problem with that. If God loves rational creatures such as ourselves, why would he not have created other races of them in other parts of the universe? If you like flowers, you might not just plant one flower, you might plant many flowers. If you like species like us, you might not just create them on Earth, you might create them elsewhere too. The real interesting question is, how are they saved? How are they redeemed? Did the Son of God become incarnate among them, taking their form as he did on Earth, in taking our form in Christ? That's an interesting question. There's strong argument, and we don't have time to talk about it. I would say yes, he could do that. The third one was about time and our resurrected bodies. As it happens, I will simply say, go to our website, and I wrote an article about this. It's called the Science and Heaven. And it's about, the entire article is about resurrected bodies and the next life, and will the next world be physical? Will our bodies be physical? It's a Catholic teaching that we will be embodied, but the question is, will our bodies, and it's also Catholic teaching that our bodies will in some sense be the same ones we have now. The question is, will our bodies be physical? Will they be made of atoms and molecules and subject to gravity and electromagnetism and all that kind of stuff? very interesting question, which I addressed in that article. My view is not. I think we will have bodies, but they will not be physical in the physicist sense of the term. And there's a person who agreed with me on that, I discovered after finishing my article, and that was Joseph Cardinal Ratzinger, later Benedict the XVI. He has a book on eschatology in which he discusses this very point, and it's clear he does not think that our resurrected bodies are, as he put it, the return of the biological structure. He says we're not just going to have the same biological structure kind of bodies that we have now. Fascinating. These are the kinds of things we love to talk about. And our website has all sorts of stuff on there.
which we've mentioned the website many times, but I haven't given it yet. It's the CatholicScientist.org. So if you go to CatholicScientist.org, you can find all of this and much, much more. It's,
if you don't remember yeah.
Oh, I was going to say.
If you don't remember the link, you could just, if you Google Catholic and Scientists, you'll come across our society.
That is very true. That's how I found it every time. Google's a good thing. So we've talked about the society a lot. Now it is intended only for scientists, correct? You mentioned that briefly earlier. So not just anybody can join?
Not just anybody. It's intended. So regular members have to have a doctorate in a natural science. We have student members who are either grad students in science or undergrad majors, science majors. We also have associate members who have master's degrees in a natural science. The criteria are on the website. But we also have some theologians, philosophers, and historians who are connected with us who are called scholar associates. So we like to interact with the theologians and philosophers too.
All right, I guess I got to go back to college now. That's fine. I was talking about getting my doctorate. Now I guess I got to go back. This is,
but the benefits of membership is basically mostly that you get to go to the annual conference. But otherwise, you can go to our college chapter events. You don't have to be a member of the society to go to their events and participate in things.
I don't know. I think I might have to talk to the. Well, I was just going to say, I think I might have to talk to the managing editor of the newspaper and see if she'll let me cover your conference the next time it's anywhere near South Jersey or Philadelphia.
Yes.
Well, next year it's going to be a Catholic U in DC. Is that close enough?
Close enough. I'll be there. I love DC.
So if you had a master's in biology, that's a scientist, so you could be a member?
Yeah, you could be the associate member. Right.
Asking for a friend.
No, is that right? Yes, associate member, correct.
Wait a second. Did you just weasel your husband into an associate membership thing? Nice.
Hey, I may have. Those are his questions, so you can see that he's part of your people.
Her husband has a degree. What is it? And
he's biology, environmental science. But
he's also a longtime chaplain in the Army, or chaplain's aide in the Army. So he'd be perfect for this, actually.
I'd be interested in his reaction to my article, Science and Heaven.
He's on it. I can tell you. That's what he'll be doing tonight.
he can give me his feedback. Now, I should say, we ran that, but we have a theological advisory committee because, we're a bunch of scientists. We don't want to be shooting off our mouths about things that we're not experts on. So we have a group of theologians who keep us honest. And that article I sent to these 4 theologians and it got their feedback. And they pointed out some errors in the first draft, so I corrected them.
Ouch.
Hey, that's what scientists and experts are for. Exactly that thing. That's perfect. Listen, this has been an absolutely delight for me, and I'm sure Jen's husband is going to truly enjoy this podcast later on, and you will definitely be getting a future member, no doubt about that. I hope she doesn't mind. Do you think he's going to make it out to Chicago in a week, Jen? Because that sounds like that conference sounds amazing.
I feel like he'll definitely be there next year. I'll tell you that right now.
Next year, well, this year we're kind of booked up. Unfortunately, it's.
Well, that's a good problem to have. Well, Dr. Barr, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast today. We greatly appreciate that. Regardless of whether I can be a member or not, I will remain on the newsletter list because I truly do enjoy getting them and reading up on everything that's going on. And you certainly have my support. And if you ever need the support of a PR guy, just feel free. You can let me know. I'll help you out in any way I can. But thank you very much. No, sure.
Thanks, Mike, and thanks, Jen. Yeah.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. So, Jen, thank you very much for hopping on with us, and to our listeners, thank you very much for joining us again, and we'll talk to you again next week. See you, everybody.